I'm Jim Collison and live from the Gallup campus here in Omaha, Nebraska. This is Gallup's Theme Thursday, Season 3, recorded on January 26th, 2017. Theme Thursday is a Gallup webcast series that dives deep into the CliftonStrengths Finder themes, one theme at a time. Today's theme is Achiever. If you have questions, comments, or contributions during the webcast, we do have a live chat room that's available for you. Adam loves it when I do this, right below the main video window down there. So if you haven't joined us in the chat room yet, go right below the video. It'll say login, bottom left-hand corner. Just click that button in the guest, choose a guest account, put your name in there, take out it'll say guest and some numbers. Take that out, put your name in, hit submit. You'll jump into our chat room, about 30 some of you in there now. And sometimes that's the show within the show. So you want to join us in the chat room. Best way to get your questions in, and you will have questions today, so join us in the chat room. If you're listening to the recorded version or you need custom strengths coaching solutions for small, medium, or large organizations, you can always contact us. And if you want to contribute to the blog, you can contact us that way too. Send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. Micah Librant is our host today. Micah is my favorite learning and development consultant. Micah, I've been waiting a long time to say that again here on the Gallup, or here for Gallup. And Micah, great to have you on another Theme Thursday.
Thanks, Jim. It's awesome to be back. I feel like we came back from summer break on the first day of school here. It's just fantastic.
Yeah, we'll remind individuals if they missed last week, Micah, doesn't have a theme associated with them, but give them a minute on what they would get if they missed last week, and they should go back and listen to it.
Yeah, so if you've never listened to Theme Thursday, this is a great place to start. But you might want to also think about starting with Season 1 or Season 2 and binging on those. In Season 3, which is where we're kicking off today with our very first theme and our very first guest, we're really talking about each of these CliftonStrengths themes in depth as they relate to leadership. So last week, I think if you Google it, we call it our kickoff or Theme Thursday Season 3. You can look for it. We got to interview Jackie Merritt, who is absolutely one of Gallup's very best coaches, specifically to leadership. And Jackie talked about what's different about leadership today, what is challenging, perhaps, that a lot of leaders face. And then we also introduced the framework we're going to be using throughout this season, which is based on Gallup's book, Strengths-Based Leadership. We're going to be talking about all 34 of these themes specific to their domains of leadership. One thing to note is that these domains are, they weren't originally part of the CliftonStrengths Finder, the original design. They really are a way to describe it. Very often I talk about these domains as being the art of the science behind CliftonStrengths. So we talk about executing domains, influencing, relationship building, and strategic thinking. Today, we're kicking off our executing domain. If you think about what does that mean, it really helps you understand not what people do, but maybe what motivates their behavior. So those natural patterns of how you think, feel, and behave cluster together to create a theme. And the themes within our executing domain are those talents to say, I'm going to lead by rolling up my sleeves and getting things done. The executing domain really is the doing. If you're curious about the framework, or you really want a little bit of background around where this came from or the best way to use it in a coaching conversation, check out Jackie's post from last week.
All right, good. Just a little reminder to go back and get that started. If you are subscribed to Theme Thursday, which many of you are, but if you're subscribed, that'll come actually automatically into your feed today or tomorrow. So we'll feed that to you. Best way to get it in case you miss it, the best way is live because we like it best that way. But the second best way is to subscribe. Micah, let's introduce our guest and let's dive into Achiever.
Fantastic. So today I am thrilled that we have a pretty fantastic guest with us. Robert Dell goes by Dell. He's best described by his personal mission that was inspired by his own strengths discovery. His mission is this: to live as healthy as possible for as long as possible, pursuing his passions while sharing and helping widely. I got to speak with him this morning before our show, and I can tell you that he just lives through that mission in such an authentic way. So it's going to be our pleasure to have him. little bit of his background. Dell is now fresh into phase 2 of his life after executing his plan to retire as early as possible after a 28 plus year deeply fulfilling and engaged career as a senior executive at Johnson & Johnson. He's now more deeply engaged in passions and pursuits that he's had in parallel to his corporate career. We'll get to talk about some of these, but they include performing as a club DJ in the US and abroad, writing as a senior editor for a music magazine called Five Magazine, increasing his abilities in music production formally and informally, and coaching and mentoring across a diverse group of people. As a vice president on the board of the nationally renowned public school, Philadelphia Central High. He's currently calling in from the center of Philly, and we'll get to learn quite a bit more about him. Dell, thank you so much, and welcome to the program.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here.
Dell, great to have you as well. We'll come back to you here in a second. Micah's got a little bit of housekeeping to do as we think about Achiever. Again, if you haven't downloaded our companion guide, we've got lots of great material out there for you to follow along. So stop. If you're watching this and you haven't downloaded it, stop it, pause it, whatever you do, download the guide and then come back. Micah, when we think about Achiever, let's kind of get through the material.
Yeah, so here's how a program's going to work. I'm going to start off by making sure that we are all speaking the same language about the real nuts and bolts, the definition of achiever, and then I'll quickly take us through what does this look like if you're a leader. Now, I'm going to say leader, and you might think something formal within an organization. You might think something informal within your community. You may even think, how do you lead your family, your friends, your loved ones? I'll leave that interpretation up to you, but when we talk about leadership, it is someone who I think has some responsibility for helping other people. Somebody, you could even say, who has followers. So that's how we'll do it. Then we'll dive into what does this really look like for Dell. So it's my job to make sure we're all on the same page, and Dell's job to be the poster child and add some color. You'll get to hear him talk about his own stories and take his other themes into that. We talk about theme dynamics quite often, and so you'll get to hear some of his other top 5, and in fact, perhaps his top 10 come into play. But as I talk about Achiever, I'll try and keep it as clean as possible. Achiever by itself is about completion. Very often, I think we can confuse it with competition, with responsibility, with activator, with arranger. When we look at what happens, sort of the moving pieces of how we get things done, Achiever is unique in that it's about finishing. Now, that means that people with Achiever have this internal drive to finish. Very often, they may have more energy, more stamina, more momentum than others. The image that I have in my head for Achiever is that of old movies that I've watched that show the inner workings of like a big ship. And I think about the engine room, and there's all these moving pieces, but it just keeps chugging forward. My 18-month-old would be thrilled that I'm starting to talk about chug because he's a big fan of trains. But it is that drive. It's that internal burning and that forward drive to complete things. If you look at the companion guide, what we've given you here is the full definition. I think it's incredibly helpful if you've got Achiever to really understand what we mean, how we define Achiever, what the science behind CliftonStrengths suggests that theme of talent includes. You'll notice some things like a whisper of discontent. That's one of my favorite sentences in that definition. There's always something more that can be completed. Achievers as leaders might have a little bit different of a definition than they do as individual contributors. If I'm an achiever, I can manage my to-do list by checking it off. I might wake up in the morning, starting every day at 0, looking forward to what can I complete. Now, if I'm a leader of other people, I might use that in a little bit of a different way. I can be a pace setter, helping other people understand what we as a collective need to complete. I can be an energizer, using that engine sort of from the back rather than from the front and helping cheer people on. I think about when I was young, my family for one Christmas got a Nintendo. And we had one game, and the one game was a car racing game. And it was before computers were cool. There was like 2 tracks you could choose from, and you raced around in circles until the race was over. And there were these checkpoints that you could go through. That was actually what they were called. And every time you hit a checkpoint, your car that you were driving on this Nintendo game went a little bit faster. That comes to mind when I think about achiever as a leader. Being able to notice completion and celebrate it means that you can help people see, even if the task seems huge, you can help people see what the progress is toward that task. If you take a look at season 1, Scott Caldwell talks about his achiever in a almost a performance management mode. He talks about, am I 5% complete? Am I 10% complete? Am I 50% complete? There's that pace setting that comes with achiever. And again, it is because you're driven to fix that whisper of discontent at all times. It is the productivity theme. It's the doing theme. It's about momentum and energy. But I think as a leader, it's also about serving. It's about creating acts, completing acts for other people. If you look at the bottom of the first page of our companion guide, what we're talking about here are the 4 needs of followers. Gallup's really started to dive into leadership by studying followers. We know that regardless of what kind of a leader you are, what you all have in common is that you have followers. And so we asked millions of different followers, what is it that they get from leaders who they admire or leaders who they willingly follow? And we know that willing followership is comprised of about 4 areas: trust, compassion, stability, and hope. And again, you can read quite a bit more of this if you pick up the Strengths-Based Leadership book. What I wanted to think about and what I'd love for you to listen for as we hear some stories from Dell is, how can achiever instill these 4 things in their followers? A few ideas I have for you are: a leader might use achiever to instill trust by delivering on what they promise. It might seem super simple, but if you're moving from the individual contributor position into a leader with achiever, you might need to get used to promising something before you complete it. Think about communicating out loud, here's where we're going, so that when you deliver on it, it's that follow through. You might also create trust by inviting others to work with you. Achiever and relator show up quite often together, and we find that relator has that desire to work hard in close relationships with others. So when you think about putting those together, you could create trust by thinking about, how do I invite people into the engine room? How do I invite people in to work hard with me? A little bit about compassion. Achiever can show compassion by thinking about some servanthood. How could you serve others through tasks? When I had my baby, I thought that everybody around me was crazy because all I wanted was quiet. And then I realized, oh, they're not crazy. They're achievers. My husband and his family showed up and they installed a new disposal in our kitchen, and they built a porch that I had always said I wanted. And I remember totally losing my mind, full of hormones, and just crying to my husband and saying, why can't people just sit still? And my husband, bless his heart, said, Micah, you know that strength thing that I have? Well, they have it too. That one that makes me do things. And that was the moment that I knew he really loved me, because he was willing to talk strengths back to me about him and those who loved me. But that sort of compassion piece, I think achiever is, what can I do for you? What can I complete for you? Another way that leaders show compassion through achiever is by being willing to help navigate. I think about leaders with high achiever who can take a big task that others might be facing that feels daunting and give them some idea of how we can break that big task down into milestones. It's a fantastic way to say, we're here with you. We're going to celebrate the 5, 10, 15% completion. Just a few more ideas. Achiever can provide stability by communicating progress, not just completion. It might be a little bit of a stretch for achiever sometimes, because we've got our eyes so far on the goal of what does the end look like. Sometimes even reflecting that milestone idea back on yourself so that you can communicate, here's how far we've come. You do have that awareness. To you, it might feel like discontent, but if you can help people understand what has been completed, even if it's not over, that can help provide stability. Celebrate those milestones, not just the very end. And how can achiever create hope? My favorite 4-letter word. Achiever, I think, is always wondering what's next. And sometimes that can mean that achiever doesn't slow down enough to celebrate, but that wonder of what's next is something we could lean into. I think that's hopeful because you're looking for what's next. Maybe you're also helping other people see what's next. And that can mean helping other people see what's better. Celebrate achievements, talk about the effort as well. The best part of achiever, and I think the most that achiever has to give, is elbow grease. It's just the courage to roll up your sleeves and do it. And sometimes that's what people need in order to instill hope. Sometimes people need to hear this task is going to be hard and we're going to work hard toward it. How's that sound? That was our first season 3 overture for Achiever. Jim, how are we doing?
Yeah, no, I think we're doing great. I think what we really wanted to do different this year was bring in that third voice. And especially as we think about leadership and what we're doing. So Micah, bring Dell in and let's talk about that.
Awesome. So I just have a little bit more great notes on Dell to help you introduce him and understand where he came from. Dell's a certified Gallup strengths coach. He was also in the first group of certified coaches to complete our builder profile, formerly called EP10. He did the Train the Trainer program there. He's even in the process right now of doing something very unique and exciting with builder profile related to his role at Central High. So stand by. Maybe he'll give us a little bit of a taste of some preview of what that is. Okay. Dell uses his strengths-based coaching in every aspect of his life while living in the city that he loves, in the middle of everything, Philadelphia, with the woman he loves, his wife, Jennifer. And just a little bit of his how he landed in strengths. He was with Janssen, the worldwide pharmaceutical sector of J&J, when they began to use StrengthsFinder, Q12, and a specific strengths-based action planning for the last 5 years of his career there. While he was there, he was a leader in leveraging that approach for those tactics across J&J. He's used this in succession planning, team building, individual career development, and also just to enhance the customer experience as well. We would be remiss if we didn't give a shout out here. He specifically wanted to give credit to Gallup senior practice consultant Jackie Merritt. Jackie was his initial coach while at J&J, and she had a huge impact on him both professionally and personally. Dell, I'm thrilled to welcome you to the program. Thanks again for being here.
It's a real honor. I mean, when you talk about being engaged, this really does do it. And you talk about the impact that an individual has, especially when you're in a corporation like Johnson & Johnson, real mammoth worldwide, and the fact that this wasn't a developmental program du jour. We kept up with it and it began to grow. And as leaders, we had individual coaches for part of that. And what was great was that Jackie really kind of changed my professional and personal life as we first started to do that individual strength discovery, which I think is at the heart of it. That's why, even though most of us on this today are probably fairly well versed in all of the 34 themes, drilling down on a constant basis. I know Jackie always said this, that she learns every day. And this is somebody that helped to organize some of the original ones probably 27 years ago when she was 12. So I just love that we're doing it this way. And I'm just honored to try to share a few things today.
Thanks. Could you just tell us first your top 5 and then a little bit about what Achiever has looked like for you?
Yep. So it's Woo number 1, Achiever second, Positivity, Arranger, and Strategic. If I went down one more, one of the things I really lead with in terms of domains is the influence domain, because I also have communication. And as Jackie always said, I have kind of the influencing triad there because of Woo, positivity, and communication. So touching really on the social, the emotional, and really the verbal components of that. So, as I think about Achiever, one of the things as we all think about these is, while we're drilling down today, we know that none of these stand in isolation. So even for me, it's tough to get myself to really drill down. And as we'll talk about some of the complexity of the rest of your top 5 or top 10, whether it's ourselves or helping others in terms of being a coach. But for me, every day, it's almost like satiating that internal fire inside. I want meaningful accomplishments, and I want them in all ways and always. So I think from that perspective, what you'll see me doing is probably a lot of you do that have Achiever. And it wouldn't be surprising that a lot of the 30 people that are on today, and those of you that are watching this maybe downstream, have it as your number 1, because in aggregate, it is the number 1 for Gallup across the world. And probably what we all do is write those lists, right? I have to-do list for to-do list, where I'll organize the to-do list. Now, maybe that's bit of my arranger sneaking in, but it is without a doubt something that we do. We want to check those off. And it's not just the 9 to 5. Or because we're achievers, it's probably not 9 to 5, it's probably 6:30 to 7 o'clock, right? Because we get up earlier, we stay longer. People say, how do you have so much energy? How are you doing this? I can't keep up. Well, that's because we're trying to do those things that are meaningful. And one of the things that I like that you mentioned was, how do we measure things? And I think as leaders, that's important for teams, because to not have measurement is to not really have goals. And so that's a big thing for me over time, is how do we do that? One of the things that for me, and this marries in a bit with Johnson & Johnson as a whole, we have a company by the name of Human Performance Institute. And you see I'm using we, even though I'm in phase 2 and I'm almost a year retired from J&J, but I can never get away from the we. I love J&J. And Human Performance Institute is all about energy management. And it's all about how are you the best in whatever part of your life, personal, professional, family, just for yourself. And so one of the things that I know as we think of even basements and balconies, for me, that break, that freedom to have roles or to do things where I know what I need to get done, I'm setting the parameter, and I'm going and getting it. That's very important. And so when you think about either using your achiever as a leader, and I want to talk in a moment about how I'm a leader in various roles of my life, past, present, and future, because I think sometimes leader is a little bit of a misnomer, or we define it only in terms of when you have hierarchical leadership. But one of the things that I find when I slip into the basement of achiever is, like many of you probably, you can doggedly get on a project and you find yourself, we're holding this computer here, right? And we're going away, or we're on the phone, or we're digging into data, or we're engaged with our child, or we're engaged with, a hobby that we have, and we're trying to win the game. Is, when do you step back? Because for me, what you described earlier, Micah, in this kind of like, oh my, I'm almost burnt out. It happens because I haven't stopped. My wife, who has achiever much lower, and in fact, 8 of her top 10 are in the relationship domain. So a little bit different there, where I'm high in the influencing domain. She's very high in the relationship domain. I'll be working and she could hear me start to grumbling or use some different 4-letter words than hope, Micah. And she'll say, sweetie, you need to get out for a little. You need to go be with some people, bringing in my woo. And I find if I do that, I then come back, and that tireless drive to get it done and check off my checklist becomes much easier. So that's one of the things that, even as a leader, what I found when I had larger teams at Johnson & Johnson, I had to do that little bit of that self-actualization, because what would happen is they felt the positive energy to achieve our goals. They knew as a team we were going to get it. But if I slipped into that negative, because I have high positivity, that's bringing in another one of my top 5, then that would get in the way of our achievement. So those breaks are always, part of it. And I think that's another one of the things that I've always seen with the theme of achiever is, in that pursuit of those goals, that sometimes the people aspect can be lost in the face of getting the result. And so I think whether we're coaching, mentoring, or leading ourselves, that's one thing. No matter how the rest of your wiring is of your 34 themes in your order, that's one thing that most good leaders do, is they never forget the people. It's celebrating those successes you mentioned, but it's also to make sure individually that never gets in the way, or if it does, that you find ways with complementary strengths, with members of the team, as a coach to a client, that you make sure that you don't get in the way of that. You help them to prevent that type of thing. So that's kind of a top line. A lot of what you were saying was resonating. You saw me probably in the corner smiling and nodding, and probably a lot of you listening now or later are going, of course, yeah, right? Jackie always said that to me. Of course you feel that way. Look how you're wired.
I love that. So, Dell, I think that sometimes we perhaps oversimplify or try to go back to a weakness fixing aspect with these. If we see that there's a basement or that achiever can get in your way, and we say, well, just turn it down and turn something else up. Is there a way that you could lean into achiever in order to make those relationships?
Yeah, one of the things, and some of you may have remembered this concept of when a theme or a strength is more raw. And when you think about rawness of achiever, that's more about keeping busy to do something. And as that strength, that talent gets more refined, better, it kind of, to use the term, matures, you try to produce results. So you see that even within that, as you work on this muscle of achiever, it can be this busy and active and kind of doing phase, but you want to try to almost settle into that to say, where am I going with that in a focused way? So for example, when I think back to Johnson & Johnson, there was a couple people on my team that had very strong discipline. So what did they do? They helped to give a little routine, some structure, some order. So if we were charging as a team, and our team's number one was actually achiever, because we would do mapping of our entire intact teams at all levels. That was one of the things that I really worked on because it really helped with team dynamics. So the person on our team that had real high discipline, I can remember him very clearly. He would at times almost call the timeout and say, okay, let's get some order and structure. This goal seems really good. Let's back into that a bit. Now that would stimulate for me my number 4, the arranger, and a little bit of my number 5, the strategic. Then we had another person on the team that had high focus. So if you're coaching or if you're leading and that aspirational goal that you're setting, this drive, let's get in tomorrow at 6, hell with lunch, we're going towards it. That person with a focus, Jackie always used the term for me, it's a narrowing theme. It really helps you prioritize. So that's where that thought of complementary strengths and complementary partnering are so critical, whether it's an individual, a team, or you as an individual leader. And then another thing for me that really worked, and some of you may be familiar with it, it's paired up. So how do some of your strengths pair up with other strengths? And not all of them hit all the 34 with real discrete pairing, but a couple for me, like when I think of my high positivity. So my positivity is number 3. So when I think about achieving, this makes me feel great because we're going to do well. I know I'm going to hit my mark and we're going to get to celebrate. And you know what? That feels good to celebrate. And that almost ties in with my achiever and my woo. So my number 1 woo, I love doing this with new people. So my relator's a little more towards the middle. So it's not necessarily so that I have to have like the same group. So for me, with my individualization, which is in my top 10, and this woo of new people, I love if suddenly the team becomes 10 different people and we all agree on this goal. And you can even see as I'm doing this now, I'm thinking the things that we've done and you see me animated, I'm feeling that as I'm sharing this with you. So I think that's where, as a coach, I love that we drill down and you have to really understand achiever, especially since it's so prevalent worldwide, but never look in isolation. That's, if Jackie imparted in my experience helped me grow in any way, it's you always have to look at the dynamics, but in a focused way. It can't be too spread out.
Excellent. So tell us, what do you think we should appreciate about achiever specifically? Can you think of a time where you've seen it really at play for you?
Yeah. I love the thought of that, building trust and providing stability. When you think about how do I show compassion to a team or inspire this hope. And it was almost like that helped me to look at both the balconies and basements and say, what did I want to do more purposefully? And what did I want to try to avoid related to those 4, give me the right term for it. I forgot.
Needs of followers.
Needs of followers. Yes. See, we're always learning. For me, the trust came with the appreciation and the celebration of success, because as you saw, I think a leader that does that, when that's not necessarily something that's absolutely tied to achiever in what always happens, and it's more of a watch out, people start to really say, wow, we did that, but Dell took the time. Like we had a lunch and we kind of went around the room. So I think that, once you start getting that trust, and then in today's world, look at the stability. I mean, when I'm mentoring a lot of millennials because of music, I'm always around millennials. And one of the things, and look, no matter what side of the political spectrum you are, we're in an unstable world. And for millennials that are thinking, what's my future going to be, regardless of their aspiration personally or professionally, one of the things that helps is to get a few of them together, because I think working hard together with that achievement really lends them into a place of, I feel good. I feel like everything's not dropping around me. I'm not worried about my financial thing because we've talked about that, and we've gotten a few different opinions on how we're going to save a little better. And then in terms of compassion, I think I mentioned it and I can't mention enough with achievers is really not forgetting the people in fault of going after this golden cradle of achievement every day, because I think that shows of people that you have that inner compassion, that the reality is like you having a baby. As you said, your husband, high achiever, he's going to kind of nest and do things around you, and you're just there, kind of trying to get used to this new life that's in you and is now part of your family. So I think never forgetting that and kind of calling the little individual time out, whether you're managing your family together, like you and your husband, or whether it is, managing a group of people, or importantly, for a lot of the audience on this podcast, how are you doing that for people that you're coaching? And I think that's a big one. Then finally, the hope. Hope to me as an achiever comes from a place of, how do I set that challenging goal that's really going to help me realize my dream? Or when I was at Johnson & Johnson, the dream of our pharmaceutical sector or the group that I was in. Or if it's in our family, like Jennifer and I, how do we prepare to get into this phase 2 where I'm talking to you now and no longer having to do a day-to-day corporate job? All that is setting that goal and that hope and aspiration. So I think that's where Achiever kind of touched for me. It's both that maximizing your balcony, but also minimizing your basement in a more prescribed way.
Who are the best kinds of partners for you with High Achiever? What do you feel like great partners bring to you?
Yeah. As I said initially, that discipline and focus, without a doubt. One of the things that I know you have, way up there, adaptability, because we can get a little bit of tunnel vision, depending on what other strengths and talents that you do have. So I think those people really help to kind of focus that way. I think at times, although my competition's kind of midway, depending on what it is, Achiever may not be good enough if you're talking about sports, small businesses, the race for a family to kind of do well. So sometimes having some people that say, well, not only do we want to achieve, but are you comparing that versus what? What is in that sphere that you want to really try to kind of excel in. So I think those folks are really important. I think individualization. Now, for me, I have that high, but I think that working in a manner that fits every person, because what can happen with achievers are, we can start without an adaptability or maybe an individualization. You might start to say, this road and this path is the one. Same, I'm lucky enough to have strategic there. So when I think of it with my achiever, if I don't succeed right away, then I'll try it again. And if I don't do it that way, then I keep seeing what are the other paths, almost that creative analytical approach and to kind of get at something. So I think those things can really help in small teams, or if you're coaching for like a lot of you do, to ask those questions, to try to self-actualize, have the person self-actualize, to say what around them or who around them can they bring that to bear on what they're trying to do as an achiever.
Yeah,
If that answers the
sometimes,
question.
absolutely. Sometimes we talk about achiever being it's a swim meet or a track meet. You're beating your own personal record.
Yes.
And it sounds like you're describing some other themes who can help you say, okay, who's swimming in the lane next to you? And why are we even at this pool?
Hey, look, as we've seen in the world, sometimes you could even win and still take a look at, did I really win in the right way? Did I win as I wanted to win? So sometimes, those are other things maybe getting into bear in the basement portion of a person's talents. But I do think that you could bring a lot to bear. What's interesting, though, and I wish I would have seen Jackie's, I'll have to go back and take a look about last week, is I also feel like leadership appears in various different ways. And as coaches, if I take the four main buckets of where I apply strengths more purposefully. So what I did with Johnson & Johnson, we were lucky enough there that there was a transparency as to everyone's top 5, and in many cases, even top 34, all 34. So I was able to use my strengths to help coach to their strengths. However, at Central, I have kids, I have a board, and many of them haven't done strengths. And so in that case, I'm really always keenly aware of my strengths, and I try to apply that to the analysis of the situation that I'm dealing with, either real time or projects or initiatives that we have. If I think about really coaching, whether it's an engagement like many of you have, or this mentoring or coaching of millennials and other people in my life, most of the time I won't engage with that unless I say to the person, look, the best $18 on Amazon you'll ever do is to get this book, do it, send me the results. And then for others to do what was the EP10, now the BP10, as I help maybe some small business owners in that. In that case, I still have mine to apply. So my leadership is applying mine, but I also have theirs to take care of. And then finally, as a DJ, so obviously if I'm in a club and there's 300 people in there, I don't know their strengths, but I'm using my strengths and thinking about, I shared earlier with Micah that, with high positivity, those of you that have that, sometimes you could go negative very quickly. And there's times where that positive energy is what you feel. For those of you that have ever been in a room as you're dancing and it's great music and this whole energy filled room. So I'm using my woo and my positivity and communicating through music. But if something negative happens, in the past, I would wear it on my body, my look, my actions. And suddenly, what have I done? I've taken what I wanted to achieve that night, a fun night for everyone, an escape from the stresses of the world, a more global break, if you will. And what did I do? I got in the way of my achiever because one of my other strengths went into the basement. So it's those kind of times where I think you have to think of your leadership. No one reported to me. Many times it's a free party or they're paying. With my mentorship, most of them are just, maybe somebody may buy me a lunch once in a while. So it's not like there's a paid thing there. So I'm leading, they're following if I really show trust, the stability, the compassion, the hope, if I endear that through how I engage. But think about your engagements that you may not have all the data, but you always have yours. So at minimum, really knowing this for yourself, even though many of you might have gotten on this to say, how do I help others? It starts with you. And especially since we're lucky enough to be coached, and in many cases, people are paying for your expertise. So I feel like that's a privilege and that's an honor, and we owe it to them to bring our leadership from our strengths to them. Maybe a little aspirational. Maybe my achiever's showing in that. I don't know.
I love it. When you think even just one-on-one, when you're coaching somebody, what does achiever look like when it shows up in that relationship?
Yeah. So I'm right away, and I try to do the 80% listening, and that's even, I really try to listen. And then what I really strive to do, so I'm showing that, and even how I'm discreetly telling you what I'm doing in that one-on-one, I'm striving for them to self-actualize, because that always helps. And then I have to almost ratchet back my achiever, because I want to get X, Y, or Z out of that engagement for that person based on that sequence I just mentioned. but oftentimes it's just with providing a nugget. So to some of what you said earlier, Mike, it's not giving everything. And that's one of the, that's one of the difficult things sometimes for achievers is we know where we're going probably with that person after a couple of engagements or the initial engagement, but we have to hold back to go too much. So it appears in this sequence of, I'm going to set a realistic thing that person can measure, that I can measure in subsequent either talks, via email, some kind of follow-up, but I don't want to overdo that. Also, as I would think of it sequentially to the next one, and here's where a little bit of my strategic and arranger is also showing, I want to see where that person has come to and try to celebrate a bit of where that is. Again, simplistic measurement, meaningful goals, especially if the person is also achiever, which is very likely with this #1 worldwide. So I'm trying to tie those things to both of us, staying in the balcony, really trying to stop any pitfalls that I've already mentioned for me personally, or what are some of the more commonplace ones that person may have as an achiever, or that I know that I have. And that's also probably a reason to not say yes to everything. So sometimes what'll show up in a coaching scenario or a mentorship scenario is people will ask 3, 4, 5 things of me as the coach. I try to make sure we get back to that nugget philosophy. So let's go back to where we are, because for me, it's very easy for me to say, oh yes, and let's run after that. So it's showing in this, I'll do it all. Let's do it together. Let's get in there. And we have to ratchet back a bit. So
that feels good to be asked, though, right? Because achiever loves that invitation to execute.
Absolutely. And what happened with the team at J&J? So how did it show up for me as an individual leader and the whole team? Senior leaders or other parts of our organization would always come to us. We need you. You become the go-to because people see what? They get it done. Hey, let's give it to this group. They get it done. Let's give it to, Dell. He'll get it done. Now, it's up to us with that responsibility to make sure that it gets done in a proper way. And that's why the goal setting, the celebrating, those breaks, making sure that you use people with discipline and focus so that they can kind of ratchet back, that you're not overcommitting. Very easy to do. Again, so that the people aspect isn't lost. So whether that's you reaching into some of your other strengths, or it's you reaching into the team, or it's you bringing in others. Sometimes there's even functions, when you're going through, we went through a lot of massive change in structure, in focus, as many large companies did, during times when I was leading large groups. So what would you do? Bring in a function like human resources, like communications, to help functionally, not only from some of those people's strengths, but functionally, you may say, our group with a strong achievement orientation, we need to have someone help us forcefully stop and call the timeout. So that's not something to kind of look away from, that we're so into the strengths, which is core to so many things. But let's look in most organizations that there are functions or roles or complementary strengths that you could bring to bear, and should. And so as a leader or coach, that's up to you to mobilize resources in that way to get it done. So that, that's where you might use inputs kind of at the almost at the bottom. It's 12th for me, but it's still big. That's where I would use my achiever and say, I need to reach into input to mobilize these tools and these equipment or other resources to get it done. So I think that, again, you're seeing me, my common theme today is reach in or reach out to help this achiever to really get what it could do, because it's at the heart of the executional domain, in my opinion. So you have to do everything you can to make it work, especially since it's so common.
I hear it just saturating everything you think about is reach in to get it done or to make it work. There's just this beauty of execution. And I love the transparency with which you talk about, hey, let somebody else be the brakes. Invite somebody there to be that regulator for you versus trying to do it all yourself.
Absolutely. I mean, look, in today's world, and I mean, not to get into other Gallup research, but I mean, when you look at even, managers today and how many managers, are really not as qualified. And if you look at overall engagement, actively engaged in most corporations, despite the fact that, Gallup's, doing work with probably, I don't know, the last thing I saw was like 300 of the Fortune 500 in some way. Still, people every day, you on this call, all of us in some way go, oh, the shoulders go down. I'm just overwhelmed. I'm not engaged. I'm burnt out. I can't do what I like. Well, the more you are able to get that energy up. And when do we get it? What's one of the main definitions of energy? When you're leveraging your strengths. And what hurts us, you're zapped out when you're kind of at the bottom. And so why wouldn't we do more and more of that? Because even leveraging your strengths today, the world is so fast. We're so connected. You look at the millennial generation that worries, how long will I need to work? Will this be a lifelong commitment? Literally, almost out of school or in school through death. Are you pretty much going to be doing things for monetary reasons because we're not going to be able to do it? Mm-hmm. That stress has to be placated in some way. And so that achiever will probably help them to survive, but without the proper break. And that's why the Human Performance Institute at Johnson & Johnson talks about this energy management. And most of it is what you read, which is my personal mission every day. And if you don't have that, sometimes it can almost come across as a little trite or, the personal mission. But I literally think about that every day. And so I think that that's part of the achiever. I'm ticking off each day against my personal mission. Here's another to-do list.
Yeah. What can we create? What can happen? Yeah. It's sad if we're all burned out alone together. It's probably because we're not connected enough and allowing each other to fill in those gaps.
Absolutely.
Hey, Jim, what questions do we have?
Yeah, a couple coming in. One is going back to a ways when we think about achievers and leadership, and Carol Ann actually put a nice little note. She's listening to this while she's in school, and she's got a few students with her, which is really, really cool, right? A great way to share a theme Thursday. She had said the bell rang, and I had this thought, we in our sales division, they actually physically have a bell up there. And there's been a lot of questions about, as an achiever, how do we not run over in leadership? How do we not run over those that are following, right? How do we not run over and just driving them? They're not built that way. And ringing the bell is one of those things, celebrating those achievements. Micah, you mentioned it in the hope section when we were talking about the needs of physically or finding those events to ring the bell, either whether it's physical or some kind of celebration. Dell at J&J, did you guys have, or did you build any mechanisms in to recognize people and to celebrate those achievements?
Yeah, we really did. And it came out of a lot of for those of you familiar with Q12, when we did a lot of the Q12 analysis, a lot of that hit there. But I also have, and this is opinion, and I'll try to link it to the strengths. But to me, when you're given the privilege of leadership in any aspect of your life, this isn't just the corporate world, but I'll touch on the corporate world. That means you have to have courage. And that means that it's not always that it will be in your best interest personally. And so maybe that touches on responsibility. Maybe it touches a bit on belief. It could touch on connectedness for some people. But I do think that you have to have that courage that, look, Gallup is a privately held company. Most companies that are probably on this line are people that aren't anybody that is working for a corporation or an institution. There's some public aspect of it. And so I think that it's difficult because we're climbing the ladder. We want to do well, our bonuses, our financial security, everything we talked about that's stressful, but you have to have the courage to say, I am seeing, despite what we're trying to get to, that people are burned out, that we cannot sustain this. And what was good at J&J is, look, it didn't always work, but by noticing it early and J&J having the focus on trying to celebrate as much as possible, it at least gave you steps in the process. So I would suggest if you have a small company, if it's just a team or a larger company, you have to put almost those gates along the way to say, how do you determine the points of pain? Are your leaders empowered to have that courage and to act on that without kind of career loss? And then how do you celebrate and find ways to help people in these really high stress times? I don't know if that helped, but that's kind of that courage thing for me. If not, then to the point of you should be an achiever in more of an individual role.
Mike, anything you want to add to that?
I love that you tied achiever to courage because I was actually going to close that way. So
Sorry.
No, it's perfect. Your check's in the mail. Thanks for the bump there. When I think about achiever, I think sometimes we just think it is that individual get up and do, which can sound almost cheap and easy. But getting up and doing when nobody else is, or getting up and doing when you're not sure you're going to succeed, that so yeah, here's my story to close with. I hope this feels like a love letter to the world's greatest husband. He's mine. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, he's taken. He was part of a team who went to clean up some final missions overseas. He's in the military, and literally clean up, meaning moving out some apartments that people had been living in. He was the last one to stay in this bunker that a whole bunch of soldiers had been in. And he, because of that, had to just clear out, giant TVs and a lot of leftover coffee. And he also brought back this poster, and it was sitting on our kitchen table this morning. The poster is still here. And I'm thinking, why? What are we ever going to do with this? I have to show it to you. It's a prop. So it's from our friend John Wayne. It's a big, long poster. And the quote that it says is, "Courage is being scared to death, but saddling up anyway." I just think, man, that's achiever. That's we can do. That's let's roll up our sleeves and execute.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Dell, one quick question. When we think about engagement, and you know a lot and have been in a lot of our products, and you've worked in that area, our 30% engagement number of employees worldwide has kind of stuck, although it is slowly raising. I think it's 32 something today or something along those lines. But we'd like to make more progress. Not enough for achievers. From an achieving standpoint, when you think about organizations today, why maybe is that number not moving as fast as we want it to? And you're coming right out of the industry. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think one of the clear goals of achievement or things that need to happen more that don't is those goals of people development and leadership development. So most of these, when you think about your to-dos, are always about sell more, do more, get more. And the main fact is that in this cog, it's all about people. And so until major corporations really make and really measure in a very discrete way their people development, and that means succession planning, that means improvement in skills and abilities within job, that means development of leaders and their ability to manage, where you're also seeing that number not as high as we would want through Gallup research, you won't change. And I think, unfortunately, with the loss, look, finances matter to most. I know in talking one time in a class with Jim Clifton, and he said, if everybody made kind of 75,000 or at least had a house, people would be okay. So there is the financial element. So with defined pensions going by the wayside, with questions about Social Security, I think most people, that financial well-being is not there. And therefore they jump jobs. So even if a company has it real solid, even a Fortune 500, they're not there long enough and they'll move. And so do I know the whole answer? No, but I do think that getting people to build businesses and identifying them like we did, do for academics and athletics, and that's part of the BP10. I think doing that early and getting new businesses and having alternative ways than just general corporate America is going to be the solution. And maybe that's aspirational for me, but on another one, maybe we could talk about what I'm doing with the school. I want to build that out more, but that was a little tease for that.
Yeah, Dell, maybe we'll have to have you back on a call to coach and really tease out all that work that you've done. Micah, I know for you and I, we're built kind of the same in a lot of ways. In that, I don't know about you, but for me, I need achievers. Like, I need them as a part of my life. That's one of the things. Like, I'm all thoughts and actions in front. I'm all up front kind of stuff, right? Heavy influencing, but I need these achievers to be able to actually help me get the things done. And I think one of the things I've learned as a follower is that, man, really stick to those. When I find them and we mesh, to really stick to them so that we can get things done. One of the things I've appreciated about you, working with you all these last couple of years in this, is that we kind of fake it in a lot of ways, and we push each other to that. Like, if I'm not getting it done, you're reminding me, and if you're not getting it done, I'm reminding you. And that's, as we think about needs of the follower. I mean, that can also, if you're short that achiever in there, there's other things you can do to begin to maximize those talents. So Mike, I appreciate you pushing me, in a lot of these things. And yet today in the pre-show, we were talking about guests for the rest of the year, and you were super happy because I've been on you the last couple of weeks. Micah, let's get these loaded in. And so just as we think about those needs of follower, Micah, we're coming here to the end. Any final thoughts, and thank our guest?
Well, thanks, Robert. I think that if you talk about a need that both Jim and I did not have filled in our partnership, it was the achiever piece. So the power of 3 today certainly means a lot. What a gift. When I complete something without achiever, I exhale. And I have this moment of, oh gosh, it's over. Achievers inhale when they hit completion. They think, that's so cool. And that reaction to completing something is such a gift. So thank you for sharing it with us today.
Absolutely. In fact, I'm looking down at my to-do list as soon as this is over. Seriously.
There we go.
So I'm fired up now, right? I'm not exhaling. I'm ready to go do. I'm saying how many hours we have left in the day. But thank you. It was a blessing to be on. Thanks. Those of you out there, wish you the best. Keep helping people. So that's the only way the world will get better.
Dell, thanks for coming on. Hang tight. Don't go anywhere for just a second. Micah and I will wrap this up. Micah, anything you want to talk about coming up next week?
Next week's pretty exciting. So we're going to surprise you a little bit. We're not going alphabetical by theme. We're going alphabetical by domain. Next week, we have a fantastic guest who's going to come on and talk about a ranger and what that looks like in actually a government organization. Jim's favorite theme. Jim's my secret power that he's got a ranger. We're excited to have you next week. So be sure to tune in again.
Yeah, number one for me. Excited. We'll be excited for that. We'll remind everyone to take full advantage of all the resources we have at the Gallup Strength Center. Just gallupstrengthcenter.com. Send us your questions, comments, or if you'd like to be a guest blogger. We getting seems like beginning of the year we get a lot of requests for that. And Liz pinged me and she said, "How do I become a guest blogger?" And I say it on every show, but apparently she listened to a couple that I didn't. So Liz, here it is. Send us an email. Put guest blogger in the subject line, and then send it to coaching@gallup.com. Include the blog or some ideas of a blog in there. We really like completed and original work is kind of what we're looking for. But you could get that included in our now, man, the blog, Micah, blog's just cranking right now. I told you before, about 40-some thousand views a month now. So we are excited about that, and you can get your work. Out there, and we really appreciate it. So send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. While you're out there, visit the Gallup Strength or visit the coaches blog, coaching.gallup.com. The links to our Facebook group, YouTube page, RSS and iTunes feeds, iPhones and Android app, as well as all the resources. We have tons of resources available for you guys. If you're new to Theme Thursday, we have a ton of this available for you, including 2 seasons. You can binge, right? You can binge on this. 2 seasons of Theme Thursday available for you out there. Head out to the coaches blog, coaching.gallup.com. Don't forget, we have the CliftonStrengths Summit coming up this summer. In fact, early bird pricing ends February 28th, 2017. So you'll want to get moving on that right now. Start making plans. Those hotels will fill up as well. Going to be very, very popular this year. Head out to the registration site and get more information about the summit. CliftonStrengthsSummit.com. Don't forget, we also have plenty of courses available for you as well, and the courses link is just courses.gallup.com. Not hard to find any of those and any of that information. If you found this helpful, we'd ask that you share it. Well, thank you for coming out today, and with that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.